What has been everyday life for many of us today often started with a visionary idea, a lot of courage, and a crazy prototype. In this video, we have for you 8 historical works that changed the world forever. You can expect a stimulant for pilots that you can buy in any supermarket nowadays, a book that significantly influenced the course of world history, spoiler alert, it's not the Bible, and a visionary idea from the recent past that may have a significant impact on our future. So be sure to stay tuned here at Wonderlane. Let's start our list with an invention that changed gastronomy forever. To do this, let's go back to the USA in the 1940s. Back then, 2 brothers named Maurice and Richard had a small, moderately successful restaurant. As they pondered how to take their business to a new level, they then came up with a breakthrough idea that continues to shape the world to this day. The brothers, whose surname was McDonald, came up with the idea of the fast food restaurant. They wanted to open a restaurant where meals could be served in a matter of minutes. To do this, they came up with an ingenious concept that combined all the food preparation processes into one efficient and clever system, and thus laid the foundation for fast food. They developed their concept more and more, and landed further important successes for their emerging business with their drive-in counter and the first predecessor of the Happy Meal. The popularity grew, and naturally also attracted the competition. Many imitators wanted to get a taste of the brothers' successful concept, which quickly prompted them to sell franchise licenses. With more and more branches doing well, the McDonald brothers decided to sell their company and then retire with the money. For $2.7 million, clever businessman Ray Kroc bought their thriving business from the brothers. He opened restaurants around the globe and made McDonald's the largest fast food chain in the world and the forerunner for dozens of other chains. Let's continue with a video game from 1996 that created an entirely new gaming experience and paved the way for current games like Fortnite. We are talking about Meridian 59, a game that is probably not familiar to most people, but it was the first massively multiplayer online game in a 3-dimensional world. 150 to 180 players could play simultaneously, and in the still very young internet community, the role-playing game spread quickly. Unfortunately, the great commercial success for the game manufacturer 3DO failed to materialize, and the company's console project also failed, forcing it to file for bankruptcy in 2003. However, Meridian 59 managed to maintain a small, loyal fan community until today, and so it never completely disappeared. Since 2012, it has even become an open-source game and is therefore free to play for everyone. The next historical achievement originates from Japan and came to worldwide success in the 1980s. We're not talking about anime or sushi, we are talking about energy drinks. Originally, the taurine-containing drinks were developed after the Second World War to increase the eyesight and concentration of pilots. But without further ado, the stimulating drinks came into vogue and nearby Asia and were finally made popular in Europe and the rest of the world by the Red Bull brand at the end of the 1980s. Today, the global range is almost impossible to keep track of, and what began as a military experiment has now grown into a huge industry. Red Bull even generated global sales of around 6.3 billion euros in 2020. We continue now with a historical work from our era, which may be able to completely change the financial world and the world in general. Furthermore, there are many myths about the creator of this work. His name is Satoshi Nakamoto, and he is considered the inventor of Bitcoin. Shortly after the Great Financial Crisis in 2008, a white paper proposed the concept of Bitcoin. The anonymous author, who published only under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, described in the paper his displeasure with the banking system, which in his opinion could no longer show the necessary trust as a middleman for money transfers. He saw the solution to this problem in his concept of Bitcoin, a transaction system of digital cash using blockchain technology, through which centralized entities such as banks are no longer necessary to send money. The Bitcoin network came into existence on January 3, 2009 with the creation of the first 50 Bitcoin. With just $1, investors could have bought more than 1,000 Bitcoins in cryptocurrency's early days, which would be worth about $39 million today. In the meantime, even countries like El Salvador have accepted Bitcoin as a regular means of payment and are investing in the so-called digital gold themselves. But who Satoshi Nakamoto really is and what he has to say about the success of his digital currency still remains a mystery. Let's now turn to a work that has shaped the global television landscape for generations. This groundbreaking concept started with an innocent idea and degenerated over the years into even more bizarre forms. It's about the first game show ever televised. Innocent was the idea in the sense that the first game show in 1938 was simply a spelling bee between an American and a British team. The first real game show, Truth or Consequences, aired for the first time on December 31st of 1956, and it was a bit more serious. In this show, the participants had to answer random questions as quickly and honestly as possible, or face the consequences, in which the host, Bob Barker, then moved them to joking actions such as a dance. But it did not stop at such harmless concepts. Over the years, the idea of the game show took on crazier and crazier proportions, and broadcasters around the world outdid themselves with their bizarre game shows. Japan, in particular, continued to set new standards for absurd ideas. Napoleon is said to have internalized this work. Viet Cong officers knew it inside and out, and it is required reading for Japanese managers, CIA employees, and even Brazilian professional soccer players. More than 2,500 years old, this work truly deserves the title historical, and has significantly influenced world events to this day. We are talking about the book The Art of War by the Chinese general and military strategist Sun Tzu. In the book, he describes 13 important aspects of warfare, and for each of these points, he sets out strategies and doctrines that should bring the greatest possible success in the fight against the enemy. The ultimate goal, according to Sun Tzu, is to subdue the enemy without a fight, through careful analysis of the situation, deception, and strategic use of advantages. But even for combat itself, the relatively short book provided a very comprehensive understanding of warfare. Today, it remains especially popular in the business world, as many of the lessons can be metaphorically applied to the hard-fought business world. Let's move on to a historical work that is of enormous importance for two reasons. One, it laid the foundation for the modern computer as we know it, and two, it was the very first product of what is now the largest company in the world. We are talking about the first Apple computer. The Apple I, which was built by hand by Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs in 1976. At the time, the Apple founders had only made the case out of wood, into which they then engraved the name of their company. The computer also consisted of a mount for small monitors and a very rudimentary keyboard. Despite its simple design, the Apple I was an absolute milestone and pretty much the world's first mass-market personal computer. Based on this innovation, Apple is also still probably the most important company of our time, and Steve Jobs is still one of the most important men of the 20th and 21st century. Therefore, the Apple I has truly earned its place on our list. Before we come to the last historical work, we now have a noteworthy mention for you, which is not directly a historical work, but still shaped the history of mankind very much, and behind which is an absolutely crazy story. It's about the substance LSD and its discovery. It was first discovered by the Swiss alchemist Albert Hofmann in 1938 during his research on a cereal fungus. Using the substances obtained from the fungus, he also produced the so-called compound lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD for short. In his experiments on animals, he had not yet been able to detect any peculiar effects, but one day he ingested a small amount of the substance through his skin and noticed an intoxicating effect. In a curious self-experiment, he then ingested an amount of 250 micrograms, which is a very low dosage approach for the time. But what followed, the serious scientist had not expected. He barely made it onto his bicycle, and on his way home when the substance developed its full effect, the shocked Hoffman arrived home with severe hallucinations and immediately contacted his doctor. The doctor did not notice any particular effects except for an elevated pulse. After his horror trip, Hoffman continued to research the newly discovered substance and tested even lower doses. LSD then came on the market in 1949 as a drug called Delicid for mentally ill patients, but also found its way into the hippie culture of the 60s and became one of the most consumed drugs of that time. And for our final historic work, this work of film history caused a huge scandal in its time and paved the way for a billion-dollar industry. The first adult film, which translates as The Brides Bedtime, was a film from 1896 that showed a woman undressing in front of a camera in the same room as a man. The Christian-minded population was outraged that such a private thing was being shown on a screen for everybody to see. But the lovers of this film genre were also born, and so the erotic film industry developed steadily. It even followed the screening in special adult cinemas as early as the beginning of the 20th century. With the spread of video cassettes, DVDs, and finally streaming portals, there were no longer any limits to the advance of erotic films. Today, the industry has a turnover of around $20 billion a year. And that's it for this video and historical works that changed the world forever. Write us in the comments which of these creations you find the most impressive, and like this video if you enjoyed it. Until next time, here at Wonderlane.